INECC is a national network of organizations and individuals spread across India and different ecosystems who connect on the issue of climate change from the perspective of marginalized communities. It was initiated in 1996 by a few development practitioners in India who saw the link between the climate crisis and the larger issues of sustainable development and social justice. INECC works to bring climate change and sustainable development concerns of the marginalized majority and bring their voices into policy dialogues. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for the Climate Proofing South Asia Technology Solutions Virtual Conclave, a platform highlighting and promoting technology solutions for South Asian communities to address climate adaptation and mitigation from the ground up.
I would like to do a big picture talk about the field of climate change as we see it here in India and here in South Asia. The reason is that the global conversation on climate change is a bit disproportionate in the sense of viewing it from the lens of how advanced economies see it. We here in India and in South Asia face a different world, we face a different context. And so our sense of a first principles application of the ideas and our sense of what are the priorities must necessarily diverge from the way others think. The next thing I'd like to harp on is model risk. I am myself a researcher, a scientist, a numerically oriented person, a quantitative modeler. As a scientist and as a researcher, I'm acutely conscious of the limitations of these models. So I feel that all of us are a little over optimistic in the capabilities of the modelers. We should be careful and be cautious in understanding the limitations of the best of the climate science. And what I take away from this is not a climate denialism perspective, but the concern that there could be big phenomena, sudden phenomena, things that will surprise us.
One way, as a person who sort of works on the borderline of climate science and climate action, one way to address this could be to look at people's lived experiences, especially in the areas which are most vulnerable to climate change, and to try and connect that with what climate models are saying for those locations. So that may help bring in some level of granularity in the understanding of what kind of impacts are unfolding at a particular location.
I want to bring up an unpleasant message here that a lot of the climate community has been around the idea that people will stay in situ and we'll figure out ways, we will apply human ingenuity, we will use the power of the state, we will try to change policies so as to undo or reverse the difficulties that are being experienced by the people. So whether we think of the changing pattern of sea levels and cyclones, or we think of heat waves, or we think of the altered monsoons, we think that we will cope with this. I want to start raising the question to all of us that what if we are not able to cope with this? Failure is on the table. Let's not rule it out. Let's not assume that we'll solve these problems. So, all of us should be devoted to the problem of bringing down global carbon dioxide emissions. All of us should be devoted to the problem of climate adaptation, as in, we will hold the people in situ and we will solve all the changes that come to them. But we should not assume that we will succeed on either plan A or plan B, and then we need a plan C. Pose tremendous challenges for state institutions. And we've got to worry that all our work on plan A, that is bringing down carbon dioxide, and plan B of figuring out community and state capacity for adapting to these modified conditions, we've got to worry that plan A and plan B might not work out so great. Very well, what is plan C? Plan C will be that people will move. That happened in Ireland, and then more than 30-40% of the population of Ireland left. Okay, so I would encourage all of us to envision scenarios and respond to these kinds of problems is low. So economic distress will grind away at many households in India in the bad scenario where plan A and plan B don't work out. And human beings are resilient and human beings will adapt. And for 5 years and 10 years, human beings will somehow cope and hope and try to hang on to a way of life. But beyond a point, human beings will leave. So we've got to think of large scale population movements happening slowly. The hardest thing in the world for the human mind to understand is large phenomena that unfold slowly. We don't know how many people are leaving which district and going where. So migration phenomena are very important. It's a huge story about the point at which people choose to up and leave. I think we should keep our eyes on that phenomenon. We should measure that phenomenon. And we should ask ourselves, how can we reshape society so as to be more friendly to migrants? How do we make the cities work better? How do we make the cities more welcoming to migration? Because in Plan C, there will be large scale migration.
What do we call people who are being forced to migrate because of climate change then? They do not really fit into this definition of refugee. Then they become migrants, and then they are therefore subject to an entirely different legal framework. So this is one huge big problem, which we have to deal with, because as you rightly said, if we think about South Asia, it is one of the most vulnerable regions to impacts of climate change, and we have already started seeing that this will become even more severe.
And similarly, the last point I would like to bring up today is that we've got to think of the land market. Okay, so I said that economic distress will grind away at many households in the bad scenario, and year after year, some people will leave. Now, think of the minds of the people who are facing this kind of economic distress. And one of the important elements of this agenda, in my opinion, for Plan C should be how can we improve the land market so that the land market becomes more liquid? It should be more efficient, it should be more frictionless. To make a decision to sell the land, and within 2 weeks you've sold the land,